little bit of a tearjerker. I'm going to introduce you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, our first speaker, that's a tough one to follow. That was.
I know. I feel like we just need a moment of silence right now, so we can just let that.
Okay. Our first speaker is the co-director of this event, Lisa McNeilley, and her talk is called Beehive, Hairdo, and a Faux Leopard Coat.
When I was little, my mom was famous for her faux fur leopard coat. She bought it at Hudson's in Detroit with money from her first job, and it was cool and stylish and luxurious, and she wore it all the time. In fact, it was one of the ways that we could spot her wherever we went. And one time my brother got lost because he saw a woman with a similar coat, and he chased her for 4 blocks, frantically trying to make sure our mom didn't get away. She was a flight risk. We all knew it. She used to sing, "I'm leaving on a jet plane," as our nighttime lullaby. And one time she told me if she didn't get married and have kids, she was planning to move to California and join a commune. So I kind of feel like I saved her life on this one because she was just naive and young enough to do something like join the Manson family. I'm just kidding. She's not a flight risk. She's actually here with me tonight. She stuck it out for all these years. And now she's going to let me make fun of her. When she was young, she also had long, thick, curly black hair. And her sister was a hairdresser, so she'd do it up in a beehive. If you don't know what it is, Google it. It was in fashion. When I was about 3 years old, she noticed that my hair was growing in crooked. It was thicker on one side than the other. So she did what you do, which is assume that I had a genetic deformity that would haunt me for life, and rushed me to the doctor's office. And she got there with her beehive hairdo and her fabulous coat, because when you see someone of authority, you have to look good. And she said, "Doctor, look at her hair." And the doctor, who was an older guy and maybe not so trendy, took one look at me and then turned to her and said, "Her hair? What about your hair?" And I was too young to remember this, but it's a story my mom tells about herself all the time. And then she laughs at herself because she was a young mother and maybe a little bit overprotective. Not maybe. She invented helicopter parenting. She turned worrying into an art form. My cousins used to call her Aunt Worry instead of Aunt Rosie. She was raised by parents who were Italian immigrants, and she wasn't even allowed to spend the night away from her family until she got married. So her whole life she struggled between wanting to give us the kind of freedom and opportunity that she couldn't have, and wanting us to be absolutely safe. The solution to this dilemma, as any kid will tell you, is that you just do stuff and you don't tell your mom what you're up to. The result is that my childhood was a crazy mix of anxiety-inducing safety talks and the kind of freedom no kid should ever have. Yes, that was us sinking a canoe to the bottom of the pond and then deep diving down to drag it back up again because somebody told us it's impossible to sink a canoe, and we just had to see for ourselves. Yes, that was us walking about a mile when we were 6 and 7 years old to the local party store to buy candy cigarettes with our pocket change. Candy cigarettes. Crashing snowmobiles, riding a mini bike across an unmown field, shooting BB guns at who knows what, building bonfires. Yes, yes, yes. And that's not even getting into our teen years. But on top of that was the mom who worried about everything. She worried if we pedaled our bikes too quickly. She worried if we went outside with our hair wet. She worried if we drank out of the bathroom faucet instead of the kitchen sink. She worried if our hair grew in crooked. Even now, I have conversations that go something like this. She'll call me on the phone. She'll say, I was watching the news the other day, always bad sign, and they had a report that there's a batch of pickles with salmonella poisoning. Have you eaten any pickles lately? No, Mom, I don't like pickles. What about the kids or Dave? You know what? Just go to your refrigerator right now and check and see if we have pickles. And if you do, not worth a chance, just throw them away. I'm not worried about pickles, Mom. Well, if your kids go to a friend's house, they might serve them pickles. If you get salmonella poisoning, you will just die. So if your kids have any contact with pickles, just rush them to the hospital right away. Pickles, I'm telling you, they're dangerous. You laugh, that's a real conversation. We actually did have that one. And I will admit that sometimes I repeat these conversations to my own kids so they can see how crazy I could have been versus how crazy I actually am. But you know, all of this pales in comparison to all of the good she did for us. By the time I went to college, I'd been to 4 different elementary schools and moved over 15 times. Yet, my mom, with 3 small children, managed to set up a new house almost every year. Make me cry. And make it feel like our home. Our house was the place where all the kids wanted to be. My mom made it so warm and inviting that I was in my 20s before I found out that people didn't just show up at your house and decide to stay for the night or for the week. Happened all the time. It was like one continuous party. But there were also bad days. I won't talk about what it was like to grow up with a father with mental health issues, other than to say there were periods of fear and craziness, and I have some pretty wild stories. But I like to save those for Father's Day. And in that, my mom was our constant. She took us on picnics, and she was the room mom who baked cupcakes at every single school party. She took my sister and me to our first concert when we were 7 and 8, Donny Osmond, still dreamy. And she took my teenage cousins to see bands like Foreigner and Bob Seger. She threw fabulous Halloween and birthday parties, and she invited every kid we ever knew. She would make these fantastic cake creations, like she did a circus carousel with horses that circled the cake and a canopy overhead. On Christmas, our house was an extravaganza of holiday cheer. Christmas Eve, we'd go to bed, and my dad and mom would stay up, and they'd put together toys and wrap them and stick them under the tree. And then at about 2 a.m. when they were done, she was so excited, she couldn't wait for morning. So she'd come and peek into our bedrooms, and she'd say, "Kids, Santa was here, he left presents." And we'd get up, and we'd be all listless and groggy until we got into the living room, and the air just seemed to sparkle with magic. And we'd open up the presents and play until about 4 a.m. when we'd go back to bed. And then we'd sleep in on Christmas morning, and we'd wake up and do it all over again because we were so tired. Second time around felt just as much surprise as the first time. So if you decide to parent, you learn from your own parents what to do. From my mom, I learned how to make a home that is warm and inviting, though I didn't have the obstacles she had in that regard. I learned to laugh at myself and have fun. I learned how to love my kids with limitless, unconditional love. And I learned how to worry. Because what else is there to do when you have kids but worry? Sometimes I feel like someone's ripped my heart out of my chest and torn it in two and thrown it out into the dangerous world where it will be stomped on by the overwhelming burden of life. There are mean girls and bullies and illnesses and school shootings. There's climate change. There's heartbreak. So what do you do in the face of all this stuff to worry about? You can be like my mom, get your sister or your best friend to give you a fabulous hairdo and makeover, put on your spectacular coat, and throw a party so everyone can laugh and have some fun. Thank you. Thanks. So next is Carrie DeBoer with Lessons Learned, and after her we'll have Sean Duffy doing some spoken word poetry, click clack, and one-way call, and then we'll have an intermission where you can get more treats.